to, I guess, start with is just to kind of talk about how money flows through a folio, how it kind of gets to the owner statement, walk you through a couple of brief explanations of some reports that are available for you during the month-end process to get you ready to create your batch, which is Barefoot Technologies terminology for creating your owner statement run. Because our system is a property-based system, we typically talk about running property statements, but I understand from practical applications that everybody in the business that I've run across, and certainly in my experience in vacation rentals, we always call them owner statements, but technically in the Barefoot system, they're property statements. But because we send the money to the owner, we typically call them owner statements. So I'll walk you through a bunch of those reports. We won't get into too much detail, just letting you know what's available and how things kind of work. And then we'll go ahead and create a property batch and take a look at what that looks like, just how easy it is to actually get that created. We can walk through taking a look at posting charges in a couple of different ways, through work orders or directly through a property, and then how you can make changes to your statements as you're in the process. Once we get a look at that, the process will be the same for creating vendor payables or a payables run. And I can show you some of the reports that we have available to help you with that. So before I get started, does that kind of cover what you'd like to see today?
Good for me, yes.
All right.
Yeah, we're mainly,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're mainly interested in how our current system matches up to this, and I guess if you can give us an overview of yours first, that may answer some questions rather than just starting out with our own questions that we have based on what our system will or won't do.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to come here to our search for reservations or search for folios page. I'm going to call up a folio that I know that I have already here. And it looks like I got logged out, so just bear with me just a sec. All right, so we're just going to dive right in. I'm going to go to a folio that I already know that's in place, that we've been working with on and off during our different demos. So I'm just going to navigate here to folio number 30. So Linda, what we're looking at here is basically our reservation screen. And what you're going to be able to see is that the accounting in our system is really, really transparent. All the accounting for a folio from the standpoint of money that you want to collect from the guests is very detailed, as well as giving you the ability to see the flow of money once it's been received, who it's going to be paid out to, and on what basis it's going to be paid. And the reason I say that is because you may choose to pay your property owners once a week, twice a month, or once a month. The system allows you to do it as often as you'd like to. So what I'm more concerned about is on what basis you're going to pay those owners, not the frequency with which you pay them. Does that make some sense?
Sure.
Cool. So basically, we've got some rules set up in this demo system that are not going to be the same as the rules that you guys are going to have, but they're just kind of some sample rules. For example, we're looking to collect for a reservation made on January the 6th. We're looking to collect $1,770 on the 6th, the day that the folio is made. And then we're set to collect an interim amount on January 18th, and then the final payment on February 1st. I know these amounts don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, but I wanted to just be able to show you that you can set up different rules based on the kind of reservation to collect money from the guests at various points in time, and then also to pay money out based on various criteria. So I can see here that I have my owner, George Clooney, based on the fact that we have received full payment, and actually we owe this guest a refund, all the money that's come into the reservation has been allocated to various services that we're charging the guest for. Therefore, it's also been set to pay that money out automatically. In other systems that I've seen and worked with, there are processes that you have to go through either on a daily, nightly, weekly basis to move money from one bucket to another bucket. For example, some systems will bring money in to a reservation or to a folio and put that money into an advanced deposits account. And then whether it's a process of checking the folio in or running some sort of nightly process in the system, that money would then be moved from an advanced deposit account to, potentially an in-house guest account or to the owner's account. Well, in our system, that's done automatically. There's no separate process that you have to go through and potentially miss to allocate money out of the system to either owners or vendors. And that's why I say this is a very transparent system, because you can see right here, once money has been received, who and when it's going to be paid out to. So I can see here that I have due dates in my services that are going to either be an expense or income to the owner. As well, I can see that I have money allocated to be paid out to all the different services and vendors on the folio. Any questions so far?
No.
Cool. Well, then what I'd like to do is take a look at some of the reports that we have. I'm going to go back to this search for reservations page, and I can open that in a new tab in my browser so that I can actually keep working or looking at my reservation screen if I need to. So I'm going to pop over here to a second tab, and I'm going to show you that in this search for reservations page, we have quite a few reports in this drop-down list. The reports that I would use for getting ready for my month end are pretty much the same whether I'm talking to a client who pays out based on the arrival date or pays out based on the departure date, or even the date that you receive money from the guest. Basically, when I get ready to run my month end, and I'm just going to use the example of we're paying the money to the owner based on the departure date of the reservation. I'm going to come in here and I'm probably going to run a departure list and just get a gauge of how many reservations I should be expecting to have on my property statement. So I can use the departure date range for, let's say, the month of February, because that's the month that my sample folio is in. And I could find out how many reservations I should be expecting to see in my batch. So it's pretty easy to run. I just put in my dates. And I can come down here and search for different types of reservations, or I can search for all of my active reservations. I might also check for my pending cancel reservations so that I can take care of allocating any money that I might need to an owner or back to a guest, and make sure that those are taken care of before I start my process of batching up or creating my property statement. From there, I would probably move to a folio with balance report. Once I know that I have, let's say, 100 departures that are going to be in my statement run, I would then want to make sure that all of my departures for that month are paid in full. So I would use my folio with balance report. I can use a couple of different parameters down here as well as my date range, and come up with a list of reservations where people might still owe us money. And I would want to clean those up before I would start my process of batching out my monthly statement. So those are a couple of reports that I would have here. I just want to make sure that y'all remember that, and Linda, you may not have heard this yet, but on most of these reports, I can control what the output is. So if I run my departure list, and I see that there's some information that I would rather have in this report, we will give you instructions on how to go into the back end through your system and add or remove columns to this report, which I think is a really important feature. I know in systems that I've used before, basically the reports you get are the reports you get, and you have to go through kind of a rigorous customization process to get changes made to even some standard reports. Another thing to note is that we have the availability of several different versions of some of the same reports for you to be able to customize and use for what you need to use them for, rather than what we think you need to use them for.
Does the folio have to have a zero balance then before it'll pay the owner?
No, that's a really cool feature. My old system, if the folio had even a penny due to it, nothing would process to the owner. And the way that the Barefoot system is set up is that as money comes in, so if we take a look at this payment that was made on January 6th of $1,950, I can see here in this column just exactly what that money was applied to. So I've got $1,800 applied to rent, which means that $1,800 is going to be allocated to be paid out. If this payment didn't cover the full $1,800 for rent, and let's say for some reason they sent us a payment that was short by $100, then only $1,700 would be allocated to pay to the owner. There'd be a balance due on the folio, but the owner would get that $1,700. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Cool. So basically, the agent system is what we like to term a property-based trust accounting system, where unless you have specifically set up a rule so that money will be paid out without being collected, basically you will not pay out money unless you have collected that money. There are some circumstances where you may want to. If there's one example would be owner cleaning. If you clean a property for an owner upon their departure and they don't have enough income to pay for that clean, you might still want to pay your cleaner. And we can accommodate that. But basically the way that everybody sets up the system is that you do not generate a due date or a payable unless you have received money into a reservation. But like I said before, there's no nightly process. There's nothing that you have to do once that money's been received to release it. It's already set. It's just based on the date that you would use as your basis for paying out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So once you go through and you take a look at your departures, you take a look at your folios with balances due, you've cleaned all that up. Now we know that reservations may sit in the system for quite a long time, and that changes can be made to those reservations along the way and potentially cause issues. So we have in our month-end report menu 3 reports that I like to call our folio auditing reports. What these do will help you find unapplied payments. It's kind of Barefoot lingo, I guess you will. When we talk about receiving a payment and the fact that that money gets allocated to specific services, I can see here on my sample folio that I have an unapplied payment. What that comes from is the fact that I entered a discount after we had been paid in full. And the system is now saying, I have more money in this reservation than I can apply to a service. So it's triggering me to say, I have an unapplied payment. So I have a report that I can run. I like to ask people to run it, once a week to make sure that all the folios stay in good order and that it doesn't take you a huge amount of time to make corrections during the month-end process. So if you can get, into a routine of running these 3 reports probably once a week, you'll be in really good shape for running them during the month-end process and cleaning up anything that needs to be cleaned up. Now, this unapplied payment is not going to prohibit the owner from being paid, but it is going to trigger you to say, I need to do something with this folio and either add a service or refund this money to this guest and get that folio cleaned up. From there, I would run my payment mismatch report, and then I would run my no due date report. And at that point, I would consider myself ready to start the batch process. So from here, where I would go would be to the accounting menu. I would come into batch management. And from my page here, I can do quite a few different things. What I'm interested in doing at this point in time is adding a new statement. On the next page here, I get to choose what kind of statement that I'd like to run. And when we talk about a batch or a statement run, it's the same process for running my monthly or weekly property statements as it is to pay my vendors. I can batch pay out security deposits to my tenants or guests. And if I had booking agents who received commissions, I could run their batch from here as well. So one thing that I think is a little bit different about our system than some of the others that I've seen is that I don't have to learn two processes to run my accounts payable, vendor payables run, and my property statements. I'm actually running the same process, which I think is absolutely more efficient. It's less that I have to learn, it's less that I have to remember, and the process itself is really rather easy. So for today, we're going to go ahead and create a property statement. I'm going to create this for the month of March. And my keyboard is not working very well. There we go. I'm going to give it a brief description so that it's easy for me to know what's in my batch when I do a search. And then from here, I can use the field down below my comment box to further refine what is in my batch. If I'm simply running a property batch for the month, I'm going to leave all of these criteria blank. If I wanted to create a statement for just one property, I could use any of these criteria to create that statement. So from here, all I need to do is click on Next, and it's going to actually open up my batch. On this page, which is called our Statement Account List page, it's going to list all of the properties in my system and give me the opportunity to look at the statements, look at a summary. I want to talk to you about the statement report view, and then we'll go through some of the menu items that are here to let you see what's going on. So first step is we're going to take a look at the property that is our reservation number 30 is in. So to do that, all I have to do is click on the checkbox, and I can click on the hyperlink for statement, and that should pull up my statement. Property statements and vendor statements all basically have the same format, where you've got your information at the top. You're always going to have the date of the statement, and then our owner information on the top left, which should fit into a window envelope. And then if you require a working balance, we'll have that information here on the top right. It's going to list all of our reservations that have due dates that fall on or before my statement date. So basically, any income or expense that's given a due date that falls on or before my statement date, is not already included in a batch, is going to populate into my statement. So I can see here, here's my folio number 30. I've got my rent. And in this example, we're actually paying the owner the sales tax because in this particular scenario, they're responsible for remitting that tax. It's not very typical, but we do have some clients in certain states that are actually required to do that. So we're going to show our expenses for each folio. And then if we have any property-based transactions, they're going to be listed below the folio. So in this particular case, I can see that I have a toaster from work order 297, toaster oven, that's an expense, as well as an AC heating and repair recharge expense. So it's going to total up my income and expenses. It's going to tell me here that I have income that's going to be paid to the owner. I have a nice summary of the information that's in my current period as well as my year-to-date information. And you'll see that it lists all of the different services that have either income or expense on that statement or for the year. going to show me all the payments that have been made into or out of the account. And then at the bottom, we have a nice little occupancy chart that's going to show the owner, if you'd like to, that will show the owner the total occupancy for the period as well as for the year-to-date. Now, when I talk about the fact that the statements are pretty standard, there are a lot of pieces of information that you can either include or exclude from this. For example, we have some clients that don't like to show the name of the guest on the statement, and some that like to show the first and last name. So there are switches that we can help you set to kind of further refine the information that's here. I'd like to just stop for a moment and see if there are any questions. Cool. So let's say for some reason I don't want to pay the owner for this reservation number 7 at this point. One example that I use that I don't like because I don't like it when it happens is, let's say that there was some problem during this stay during December, and that guest has informed you that they're going to dispute the charge on their credit card, and for that reason you don't want to pay the owner for that reservation. And you had a conversation with the owner; they understand what's going on, and they're not expecting to see that income. It's really easy to be able to remove a reservation from that list. All I have to do is come back to my statement account page, open up my reservation list. I'm going to click on folio number 7 and remove it. Once I close that window, I can come back to my statement page and just refresh it and see my change. So now another example of just how easy it is to manipulate information from within the statement process is, let's say I'd like to actually change something on this reservation number 30. And I'm actually going to want to pay the taxes to a vendor. I'm going to go ahead and remove that from my folio list. Come over to my folio, and I'm going to say, I'd like to pay this state tax to a vendor. I could make that change. Just make sure. There's something not quite right there. So another example of something I might do is I might say I only actually want to pay $300 in commission. And I can make that change. I can now come back to my statement account list once my folio page is done calculating. Just come back here and take a look. I've now changed this commission to $300. I come back to my statement, and I can either reset my reservation list or reset my account. I have 2 different options there. And when I come back to my statement, once that's done, and I want to refresh it, I'll see that it's now pulled my folio number 7 back in, and it's changed my amount here to $300. If I still don't want to pay that folio 7 out, I can go to my list, remove it, and refresh my statement once again. So really, to me, this is a very easy system compared to what I have been used to. And I don't know how it works in your system right now, but basically if I were in the process of processing revenue to the owner in my old system and I wanted to make a change to a reservation, I would basically have to undo all the work that I've done to process that revenue, go back to the reservation, make the change, and reinstate my batch. From my standpoint of working in the Barefoot system, being able to do all that within the process was pretty big for me. So once I get done, I've looked at my statements. I've made changes that I need to make. I can go ahead and print out or look at all the statements again. I can actually use the statement report view. And this is a report that I really like. When I was pretty new in the industry and was reviewing owner statements before they would go out, basically our accounting department would print them all, and they would distribute them to a couple of different people, whether we were called property managers or owner liaisons. We would review the paper statements, we would mark them up with changes, give them back to accounting, they would make the changes and then print them out again. This statement report view, when I started using this in the process, really cut down on the amount of time and printing that I would have to do. Because basically, when I go to my statement report view and I'm looking at my property CC01, I can see here all the same information that's on my statement, but it's just really kind of condensed into what I think is a much more usable format. Although I was really comfortable using the statements, once I started looking at this and being able to really easily see if I've got rent, then I need to have commission. So if I've got something in this column, I need to have something in this column, and it needs to make sense. What I can do with this also is export it to Excel, and this really opened up a new world for me. Because I have, in my experience, I had basically a 20% commission, but if it was an owner referral, it might be 15. I don't necessarily have the time to go through and run a calculation on each one of these and know that it's right. But I'd like to have a level of assurance that before I send my statements out, that I've got the amounts correct. So what I had started to do was to export this to Excel, and all I had to do was add one column, type in a formula that says divide the commission by the rent, and give me my percentage. And then I could just kind of scan down that list and see if anything looked really odd. And if it did, then I could either ask a question of my rental agent or just go in and look at the folio and see if there were some notes there. So that really opened up a new world for me. I really like this report. So once I've done that, I've taken a look at everything, I've made all my changes that I need to make, I'm going to go ahead and record my transaction. What that does in the process is it actually creates the payment to the owner. And I can see that on my statement. So once I've recorded my transaction, if I wanted to refresh my statement, take a look at it, it's actually going to add in the information here about the payment. It's going to tell me what kind of payment. This is actually an owner that gets paid by ACH. And it's going to give me the amount. It's going to change up the summary a little bit. And it's actually going to change the statement report view to be able to reflect that as well. So now that I'm looking at my statement report view, if I come down to that same property, I'll see here in my second to last column what my payment to my owner is going to be. So I would know that for this particular statement run, we're going to have $25,496.18 leave the trust account to pay those owners. So from here, our page has changed just a little bit. We have most of the same hyperlinks up across the top. I can unrecord this if I find that I've made a mistake. I didn't catch something and I haven't yet run my ACH batch and I haven't printed my checks. I could go back to the open stage and I could manipulate whatever property I missed something on. Once I'm settled and I know that I'm ready to go, I could then select all my checks by clicking one button. I'm going to put a check mark in all of these. I would then want to assign a check number. The system will keep track incrementally of checks that are issued through the batch process. If a hand check is cut, then of course you would need to increment this up by 1, just always making sure that you have the right check number in here. If I want to, I can assign a number to my ACH transactions, but I don't have to. But what I do like to do is make sure that I've got the date correct. You'll see that the check date defaults to my statement date. And in most people's process, they're not doing this on the 31st. They're probably a couple days into April, and you would want to make sure that your check date reflects the actual date that you're issuing those checks. What that does is it just makes it very clear in this column that I've edited my check date, and I know that now that it's correct. I believe that you guys do use ACH payments to pay your owners.
A few, yeah, a few of them are primarily check.
Okay. Do you in the ACH process, do you use a Nacha file that you upload to your bank?
A what file?
A Nacha file, and is it the proper name for the text file that a lot of banks use to create the direct deposit or the ACH payment? This is what it looks like. Is that familiar at all?
Nope.
Okay. In your process of paying your owners via ACH, do you have to go in and just enter in the account information and the amount into the bank's website? Okay. All right. Well, you might want to talk to them about being able to automate that process a little bit. It's really very easy from our standpoint to create this standard file format that banks use to be able to just upload the file, and then they know how to read all this wacky information, and then pay the owner. But it makes it really easy. It takes a lot of steps out, and I know we've had some other clients that pay a lot of their owners via ACH and doing the same thing where you do, where it's more like a bill pay process than an actual ACH direct deposit process. And they've been able to save themselves a lot of time by switching their process with their bank. So it's just something to think about. It's not a requirement. But basically, once you've done that, once you've printed off your checks, I can go ahead and select my checks here. I can click on Print Check. It wants to ask me to confirm that my check date is correct. And then I can click OK, and what that does is it opens up a web page. We will help build this check template to either match the check stock that you currently use, or we have a default, and we do have a preferred vendor that has checks already set up to match what's in the system. But either one can be done. From here, you just use your browser to print, and you're all set. I can then, this little drop-down isn't populated right now, but we can email a letter, basically, send an email to the owners with a hyperlink in that email that says, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Owner, here's your monthly statement for this month. Click here to view your statement. And when they do that, they'll basically just open a link that looks just like this, maybe with a little bit different coloring, but basically it's the same format that they would get emailed to them. Or you can use your browser to print the statements and pop them in the mail. So as far as the process goes, there's just one more step, and that is to close the batch. Click on the hyperlink, click OK, and basically you're done with your month-end process. So I'd just like to stop here and see if you guys have any questions.
During that manipulation phase you were talking about, does that leave any sort of trail or report or anything about those changes made so that we can determine when and by whom and what amount was done?
Sure. I'm going to come here and I'm going to do a search for property statements. Once I get my list, I'll see that on today's date, the person logged in as demo created a statement batch for properties with a statement date of 3/16 or 3/31/16, and I can look at a log. I can see here in my log that I created this batch on 5/19. That's kind of strange. I actually created the batch here on 6/17. I removed, remember when I removed folio number 7, and then I removed folio number 30, and I reset the account, and then I removed folio number 7, and it's telling me what property I removed it from. It's telling me when I recorded my transaction, when I assigned my check, I edited my check date, and I closed my statement.
But it doesn't necessarily tell you what you did. Like, here's specifically what I'm referring to when we're going to say our owner looks at all the statements and we do these things, and at the end of the month, I want to know how many maintenance work orders did he write off? Is there a report or a way for me to know that? Like if he charges an owner $30 and he decides he only wants to charge him $15, I'd like to track that on a monthly basis to know how much of that we're writing off or writing down.
Yeah, you could do that. I'm going here to the folio and just clicking into the property information. And then I could go to the property comments, actually. Not so much a report to show you what's been written off. I haven't been asked that question. So any changes that are made on a property level would be logged, basically, on the property. So if I change, if I add a new invoice, yep.
When you're done, I have a comment towards that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I can see here that I've added a new invoice. I can see on on the folio in my comments here, I would be able to see that I changed that commission from $342 to $300. But Ed, yeah, absolutely. Would you like to share something?
Ken, there's a way that this can be done. Is so within the charge, you charge them the total amount. But then if you add a separate charge that basically shows that you're going to give them a credit or write it off, if you will, and apply it to a write-off account, then you can absolutely track that stuff. But again, it's not seamless, and but in a trust environment, if you are, doing the, this is how much it's supposed to cost, which I would recommend, and then just have that deduction. You have the ability to do it. Is it a workaround? Yeah, a little bit, but the capability is there through that process. Does that make sense, Trace?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, does that mean that we're going to go to each one and add them up, or how do we do that? I want to see it in a summary form that adds them all for a particular period. Is that possible?
Yeah, the person doing it would do them on the individual, but like what he's talking about would total it, I think.
Yeah, and again, Trace, you might be able to talk more about this, but from my perspective, I haven't really heard of anybody having that much that they write off. Now, obviously, you do. So we may need to reconfigure one or two of our reports to do it. Some of it you'd have the ability to just modify on your own. Some of it, based off of how deep you want to go, and so on, we may need to do some customization for you. Does your current system do this?
No. That's what with Brad, he likes to look at each one and make those adjustments, but he also wanted to show on the statement when he's made those kind of concessions. So hopefully how you approach in with the owner, on that. But what I would like to know from the accounting side or the operations side, how much that has been. So, to me, whether we're going to call it owner retention costs or all that, it's all perceived cost, if not real, but, so that we understand we wrote down $10,000 of maintenance costs throughout the year for owner retention, you know.
Yeah, and from that perspective,
Yeah.
go ahead, Trace. You know where I'm going to go with this.
Yep.
You'll explain it better than I
No,
will.
you go ahead. We may be coming out
No,
of
no.
two different places.
Oh, okay. So
You're right.
from my perspective, if you've set it up as a service and it's the same vendor, the owner statement, when you go to do a vendor statement, you can actually bring up all of those costs associated with that. And from the owner perspective, I believe, and Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong, based off of the service, you will be able to bring all of those up as well. So in effect, you can do this through the system. It's just a matter of charging the whole amount and then adding the discount back as a separate item instead of just saying, we're giving 50% off and that, you know, and putting it in the notes section and just actually putting in as one entry instead of two. Does that make sense?
So when he discounted something, he would create a credit like that rather than changing the actual amount.
Exactly.
Then you could go back and run a thing, whatever you called it, miscellaneous owner's expense or maintenance discount.
Yeah, right.
Or based on that charge to know your amount.
I just chose that as a sample service, but you could build a service. You know, you could add a service into the system and call it whatever you'd like. You could call it concessions, or you could call it whatever you'd like. And then on your statement, you could choose to either show it as a separate line item, or you could map it in together with other services so that it would just show the net amount. But what I can do in this case is we have a little bit of flexibility in the system. I can actually open this batch that we've just done and reset this so that it would show on the statement. And then, yeah, there are some other reports in the system that you could use as far as being able to look at a given date range and that particular service. So I would probably use my services report to look at how much I probably don't have the dates right. I'm going to open up the date range here and just see what's on the report. So I'm just resetting the George Clooney's property. Oh, I know I used the wrong date. I should have been more sensitive to that. In my work order, when I created this credit, I created it in June, so it's not actually going to pull into my March statement. But had I done that with a March date, then it would. And if I've made that mistake, I can actually come back here and change that. So yeah, there definitely would be a way to track that through the system.
Okay. I think Linda's got a couple specific work order to owner statement questions and a couple things like that.
Sure.
What about as to paying vendors off a work order? Is that possible?
I'm sorry, to do what?
Pay a vendor off of a work order?
Absolutely. If we take a look at our work order here, what I've done is I've added a charge for AC and heating repairs. And what I can tell from just opening that is that I'm charging it to the owner, and I'm paying it out to a vendor called 24/7 All Services LLC. I would go through the same process that I went through to do my property statement to actually create a vendor statement. So the first thing that I would more than likely do is come into accounting and my advanced reports and look at an accounts payable report. It's going to work basically the same way that the batch process works, where once my report comes up, my search page, I use my date to say, if I run a statement for today, what's going to be included in my vendor payable? I want to sort it by vendor. And I can choose either all services and all vendors by leaving these blank, or I could say, what do I have to pay as of today for 24/7 All Services LLC? And what I see here is that I've got $100 that needs to be paid to them for Queen's Castle. I can see a link here to go to the property if I wanted to see more about that. So when I start my statement, and I'm creating this for vendors, and I want to give it a date. I click on next. If I wanted to, I could create a batch just for 24/7 by putting in some contact information down below my comments. But let's say I forgot to do that, and I really only want to create a statement for just that one vendor, but I've created a statement for everybody. This represents all of the vendors in the system who are owed money right now. But I really only want to pay 24/7. So I would be able to do that really easily by selecting everybody, unchecking 24/7, and removing them all from the batch. Once I do that, then I'm going to have just 24/7 All Services LLC in my batch, and I'm going to see that they're going to get paid. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Cool. It's the same process whether the expense has been added via a work order or it's simply been added to the property account. If I have a charge, something I want to charge the owner, let's say it's a utility bill. I'm paying their cable bill this month. I can simply go to that property, go to the account, and I can add a new charge. It's basically the same process as adding a new charge to the work order. The little windows are all the same. But I'm just adding it directly to the property without needing a work order. But you can see from this account page here that basically for this date range, these are all the income and expense items that I should expect to see. And it's really awesome that I can click through to the work orders from right here, if I need to. So I can post directly from here, adding a new charge. If I have a lot of these to do, I would probably go to the accounting menu and go to post bills and payments. It's just, I think, a more efficient means of getting the job done. And when I say that with a fair amount of experience behind me, because I've actually used the system as a back office AP person. And I choose, when I'm doing that work, to actually come here. I can add a property expense rather than a folio expense by clicking on the button. If I just run a search, I get all my lists with all my properties. And I can choose the one that I want to add my charge to. So here's my CC01. I get the same basic information that I got in that property account page, and I can add a new bill or invoice, and I can receive payment. The reason I like this is because once I'm done adding my new charge to this property, it's really easy for me to go to the next one. I can add a comment, or I don't have to add a comment. Now I can see that my 150 is here, along with my service markup of 15. And if I want to go and add another charge to a different property, all I have to do from here is click one button to search again and pick the property that I'd like and add my new bill or invoice. It's just a really handy, really easy way to add individual charges to specific properties one by one.
What about recurring monthly charges, as in cable, pest control?
Awesome question, because I did the same thing when I was working down in Florida. So where I'm going to take you here, and I'm going to just close out a few tabs. I'm going to go to a property search. And in my property information page, I like to set up accounting use only attributes, because I may have out of 200 properties that I'm managing, I may have 50 that I'm posting utility bills for. I want to do those 50 as quickly and easily as possible. I'm going to search for utility bills for properties that have that amenity checked, and I come up with a list of 4 in my demo system here. And I know that I'm holding on to 4 cable bills, and that they're for these 4 properties. So I come to my middle menu here, and I want to add a batch new charge. When I click on Go, it's going to pull up a window that gives me those 4 properties. I'm going to choose my service. It has to be the same service. So let's say, do we have? I don't see exactly what I'm looking for. So we'll just pick a service. Doesn't matter what it is for the example. It's going to post a service for Pepsi or for Comcast cable bills. I get to choose the vendor that I want. I can give it dates that are appropriate for my statement. So if I'm in June posting, I probably want to give it a June date. I can add a comment that would go across all of these, or I can add individual comments. What I did for my cable bills is I would add the dollar amount. I would add the due date as the statement date that I want it to be, not necessarily the due date of the bill itself. Pretty cool? Does that work for you, Linda?
Not really. I mean, she's talking about ones that we do every month, not. She would have to add that charge every single month.
Well, it's for something like a utility bill where the amount is going to be different every month. I would think that you would want to post it.
It's not. It's going to be like a pest control or a cable. It'll be the same amount pretty much every month.
Right.
That's when we get into our automated service charge. And this is going to be pretty spiffy. So I can add a new service charge, or I could look at an existing charge. Well, let's walk through adding a new service charge. First, I'm going to have to give it a template title. So let's say this is pest control. I'm going to keep it as active. I'm going to give it some start and end dates. I'm going to pick my service. Which I don't have pest control in here, so we'll just use our pet fee again. I'm going to say that this is a monthly charge. And then I can say I want it to happen either all of the months of the year, or let's say it's something like AC filter changes, and I only want it to be during the summer months. So I could pick the months that I want to do it in. If it's every other month, I could do it every other month.
Like the lawn.
I can use a fixed amount, or I can use an amount that is what we call a calculated price. So in the case of pest control, you might have different pricing for different sizes of units. Or another good example for that is for AC filter changes. A one-bedroom condo is going to have fewer AC filters than a five-bedroom residence would have. So I might have pricing built into the actual property's price table that I could pull up here instead of using a fixed amount. So two different ways you can do it. If, so this is something that is going to be the same amount per property, then I could use my fixed amount and say, okay, it's going to be $35 per month for pest control. If I want to, I can create a work order each month, or I don't have to create a work order. I'm going to say this is requested by me. And in the case of a work order, I can assign it to me or I can assign it to somebody else on the team. And I can put in a description. If I could type. I always say that I sound like a really fast typer because I backspace over my mistakes really fast. So once I fill all this in, I'm going to go ahead and update the information. Oh, then I've already got a template with that title in it. So I'll change my title a little bit and go ahead and update. And here's where it gets kind of cool because I can now go ahead and say, I want to add properties into this job. So it's not going to necessarily pick all of my properties, but if I have more than 50, I want to increase this number and do a search. And then I could choose the properties that I want to have in this job. So if not all of my properties get pest control and only these 5 do, that's okay. I can add those 5 properties. So now I can show the detail. It's going to show me a list of the properties that I have in my rule. Once I get done, and I'm sure that I've got this all correct, I can then create my transaction. When I do that, it's going to post to each of the properties that's in my list for each of these months based on this service and my fixed price of $35. If I had said create a work order, then it would create 1 work order per month as well as the charge. Is that more what you're looking for, Linda?
Yes.
Cool. Do you have any circumstances where you just want to bill everybody for like a annual marketing fee, something along those lines?
Love to. Yeah. We're not doing it currently, but we do have some of the pest and the cable are the main ones, but we do have some other ones. One thing we have currently, and this may be switching subjects on you, is a fee that charges by folio for tickets. We pay $8.50 for that service, but we charge the owner half of it for each folio that uses it. How is that accomplished? in your system, like that $4.25 charge for each folio that's in their property hits on that folio. Is that done from the reservation point, or is that a back office accounting function?
No, we would want to build that into your reservation type. So we could say that for this particular reservation type, a regular reservation, if you charge the owner a fee, you know, they'll call it a reservation fee, it would be an expense to the owner and income to you as a vendor. And it could be done based on a dollar amount as a set price. It could be based on a percentage of rent. It could be based on a percentage of commission. You know, anything that's being paid to the owner, we could base that percentage on. Are you thinking of charging the guest the fee and then splitting it with the owner?
No, we're just charging the owner a fee. They're splitting the cost of this ticket value added.
You know, right now we build it into the rate, and then we have to back charge the owner before we run the statement. So it's because it's not really something we can build in as far as what charge goes. But yeah, because we don't really want the guests to see it on their, you know, in their documentation stuff.
So it's something that you would want to show as a deduction from the rent, maybe?
We want to
like
this from the guest standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it can be deducted when the owners see it, but not the guests see it. That's really the issue.
Okay. Yeah, I think we would be able to accommodate that without issue.
All right.
What other scenarios like that, Linda, are we having to manufacture?
Let's see. So when I print out the statements, I give them to the boss, and he makes his changes. How easy is it to go in and change like a work order amount to change it so that it'll show differently on the owner's statement?
Okay, so here we are at a statement. Let me just see if I've got this batch open. I do. Okay, so we're still in the process of finalizing the statement. I've got the statement open. I've got his statement open, and let's say we want this $110 to actually be $99. So from here, I could navigate by clicking into the property. I can go to my work order 297, but in this case, I would probably want to go back with my dates. I just am kind of lucky that that I posted a current transaction there. So I would adjust my dates to be able to match my statement. Oh, if I could type. So I've clicked from the statement page to the property account page. Now I'm going to click from the property account page to the work order. You know, of course, I could just go to the work order menu and do a search for that work order number, but I kind of like using the hyperlinks. So here I am at my work order, and I've made a mistake on my amount, on my heating and AC heating repairs. So all I have to do is actually click into that. It opens it up. I want to give it a new price breakdown of $90. I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now when I come down here, I see that I have $90 for my repair. I see that originally it was 100. I changed it to 90, and I had my markup of $9. So now when I come back to my statement and refresh it, I now have my $90. So that's pretty easy. Wouldn't you think?
If you get another $9, why is it only showing 90?
It's probably a due date issue. Mm. So what I can do is I can try resetting my account. Yep. So all I needed to do, Linda, actually, besides just resetting my statement page, is I needed to reset the account in the actual batch, and that pulled in the $9.
Okay.
So I missed one little step. But still, I mean, it's pretty darn easy to navigate through the hyperlinks, you know, from here to the property, from the property to the work order, change the work order, reset the account in the batch, and look at your statement again. And I'm telling you, in my old system, I don't know what it's like in your system now, but in my old system, I would have to basically unprocess this particular statement, which a lot of times would mean that I would have to undo the entire batch and make my one change and then recreate everything and make sure that it's all still right. Whereas in this one, in this system, you can just really pinpoint what it is that you need to fix within the process without having to undo the process. So does that seem like it's pretty easy to you?
Yes, yes.
Cool. What else can I help you with?
Think of anything else right now. You?
Are you going over any of the receivable stuff? Like we do a lot of direct
Receivables.
information that we have to, you know, that we have to track what bills are due by vendor, how much is owed, when checks come in, if they pay it partially, can we post the partial payment? Currently, our system won't let us post to an invoice we sent out unless it's the entire amount.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you know, we talked about direct bills as being set up with their own reservation type. So when we do that, basically, instead of being a regular reservation, it would be a direct bill reservation type. And you could have more than one. You could, you know, if you have 2 or 3 specific vendors and you wanted to really differentiate between the 2 or 3 different vendors, then you could set up a reservation type for each one of them. What that allows you to do then is kind of from this reservations page, you'd be able to use your folio with balance report and potentially your deposit pending and your due now report for specific reservation types. And when we looked at this before, we were talking about running a departures report and the folio with balance report, and I pointed out that you could do that by res type. So I could run a folio with balance report and know, you know, get a list of folios that I know that vendor owes me for. If I wanted to provide that vendor with a statement, what I would do is I would create a batch. I would create a vendor batch saying, you know, I need to know how much I need to collect from this vendor and actually provide them with a statement that shows for these particular folios, this is what you owe. And then once that, once the payment comes in, then basically you would just, are they paying you 1 check per reservation, or are they paying you 1 check for 10 reservations?
Per week, generally. we bill them for a week's worth of business, which is upwards, can be 100.
Mm-hmm. So in your current scenario, are you receiving that money into an actual accounts receivable? How does it get dispersed, or how does it get posted to each of the reservations that the money is coming in for?
Well, once it's invoiced, it's all been checked out with a direct bill scenario, so the folio portion of that is complete. We just have it in a direct bill open amount that once the check comes in, we can apply that check to the open invoice of that direct bill, and then that clears that off. But the problem lies is when they don't pay the entire amount because they're disputing a folio or something like that, and we currently don't have an ability to go back in and revise that invoice and pay it that way through the actual direct bill invoicing process.
Mm-hmm. So in that scenario, if they're not paying in full for a reservation, who's funding that to the owner if it's already been allocated in the system to pay the owner?
Exactly. Therein lies the problem.
There's the rub. Okay.
We, of course, currently, we are covering that because that person stayed there. We have a record that they did and it was rented, so we're going to do that. And but then they, for whatever reason, will say, well, they didn't come by and fill out their papers, they didn't do their tour, so we're not paying you for it. Well, that's us eating it, which is one problem. But the other problem is, accounting-wise, how do we take that back from that original direct bill invoice, post the payment amount that they gave us to that, and then offset that to whatever we're going to have to code that to, whether it's going to be advertising, bad debt, or whatever it is, to get just so we can zero out that invoice amount for that direct bill.
Right. All right, so I can see this happening a couple of different ways. First off, we're going to deal with it differently than your current system. And the main reason for that is because there is no accounts receivable module with the Barefoot system. It's all folio based. So when you run a statement for that vendor, they'll know that they owe you $5,700. But that $5,700 may be it may be representing 10 different folios for $570 each. I don't know why it's such a weird number, but so let's say they only pay you $5,000. You're basically going to need to take that $5,000 and go to each of the reservations and post the appropriate amount of money that has been paid in to each of those reservations. So you don't have the scenario anymore where the folio is locked down and set to pay the owner regardless of whether or not you've gotten money. You're going to need to post money to that folio for it to release money to the owner. So you won't have the problem anymore of overpaying an owner when you've undercollected from the direct bill account, because you're only posting what they've paid. And because you're only posting, $500 instead of $570, the owner's only going to get paid $500 unless you make an adjustment to the folio, which can be done. It's kind of getting a little technical, but there would probably be a way that you would be able to post a credit to the vendor and an invoice to an operating vendor, an Eagles Ridge vendor. But it would need to be one where you would have income to offset it. There's another way that it could be done, probably by transferring to a property, so that you would know that operating actually owes money into the trust account to cover the deficit from the underpayment from the vendor. And I'm also tossing around the idea in the back of my head as I'm talking about potentially using our group functionality to help manage these. So there are ways that it could be done, and I think it probably would be better for you guys as far as knowing what it is that you're writing off. and actually, paying the owner the appropriate amount?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of different things that are going on there. That's good from the property management side. What's going to be an issue is with the owners themselves. They're all based on departure dates. That's why we treat direct bill as a method of payment. So that folio is closed and that rent is sent to the owner's property manager or the property owner's statement for that month, even though we haven't been paid yet. So without the ability to do that, we're basically, because we don't get paid for that sometimes 3-4 weeks after, that actually happened. So that owner might not be credited with that in the month that it happened. And that would be a new scenario for them, which I'm sure will create questions. Why am I not getting in the month?
Oh, yeah.
That happened?
And remember, do you recall at the beginning of the conversation where I was talking about that folio number 30 and saying that as money is paid in, it's allocated to be paid out because it's given a due date?
Right.
And that in certain scenarios, we can build the rule to say, I don't need to collect the money before I pay it. And I gave the example of an owner clean, where an owner comes in, they stay, you do a departure clean, you want to pay the vendor, but the owner hasn't paid you yet. So we can set rules up so that it says, pay the money out before it's been collected. It doesn't have to be dependent on that. But
Okay.
we typically don't do that for anything other than things like an owner clean. But I suppose you could, if those owners are used to getting paid and you're okay paying money out that you don't have.
Oh, I'm not okay with it, but that's what we do, yeah, with it anyway. Yeah, just again, as another courtesy to that owner to not make them wait on the payment, we wait on it, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So are you actually funding that from operating into trust
Yeah.
and then getting it back once the direct bill vendor has paid?
That's the process.
Okay. We can work with that. Yeah. Pardon?
I'm for changing the process. If we don't get paid, they don't get paid. But that's not the current operating system. Yeah.
Right. And you don't want to lose owners over it. But,
No, we do not.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, it's not a typical scenario, but I think it's one that we could work with.
Yeah. Well, that kind of is the epitome of us, not having typical scenarios.
That's why you're not alone.
We need a flexible software to accommodate our unique type of management style.
Gotcha.
Now, in posting that check, is there a way to post it to multiple folios? Because you're talking about it not being invoice-driven, being folio-driven.
It is folio-driven, and that's why I was thinking about our group functionality, because you can post one check to a group reservation,
That would be
and then allocate the money in that same page.
Yeah, because that's basically the way
various folios in various amounts.
Yeah, now is it's like the invoice is basically a master folio for all those reservations, and when you post to that master folio, it posts the money to all those folios below it. So yeah, I mean that probably would be the best way to handle that, I guess.
Yep.
And we're actually
we would be able to sort something out.
Yeah, we're also getting more group business this year, and we're going to in the future, and we're seeing a problem inherent to that already too, is the multiple credit cards and the switching of cards and to folios and to cabins and all that we've never really had to deal with that much before because we had very little group business, but now we are picking that up, but the software is not very flexible or functional in how that's handled. In your group section, can you explain that?
Yeah, I think it's probably not my strongest point, but definitely we do have some really good group functionality where you can set aside a block of cabins or a block of rooms, for a specific group, for a specific date, and allow people to call in and put names to those reservations, to those holds. Then you can manage either individual payments that get sent in from individuals to their particular folio, or you can receive one check or a series of checks for multiple reservations and allocate them from a group reservation page.
Yeah, typically what we're meeting with the group planner. She gives us a credit card to hold it or charge the original amount to that we request. Then we get the individuals calling in with their credit card information and to take that. So we're basically refunding it off of the master's folio's credit card and then charging the other person's credit card on that. But within the space of the folios, we need to have those numbers changed individually so that if there are damages or if there's other things necessary to charge that person's card, it gets put in there as they arrive and depart.
Yeah, that's something that we could go over with you in training.
Okay.
But yeah, that's definitely functionality that we have. I know Claiborne has been trying to get a word in edgewise here, and I've been kind of holding on to the microphone pretty tightly. So I'd like to try to see if I can see what Claiborne would like to say.
So, hey guys, we're about an hour and a half in, and we had scheduled this meeting for an hour. So just wanted to see kind of if there were things that we needed to take and set aside for an additional meeting that we need to cover for you, or, kind of what your perspective is at this point.
I mean, we could probably do an hour or two more of what-if scenarios and those kind of things that we currently deal with. I don't know if we want to get that much in-depth into it, from just this overview standpoint there, but I think it answers the majority of them for me.
Okay. Linda, how about you?
Same for me, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess, we'll conclude this session, and then I guess I will reach out to Brad for next steps.
Okay.
Does that sound fair?
Fair enough.
Sounds good.
All right. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.